Dzień dobry. Good afternoon. Because it's an international conference, I actually decided to speak English. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna wait. I worked a lot on this presentation. So I'm gonna talk about whether or not we're framed, and by we I mean creators in the digital age. I'm gonna talk about music, but mostly, of course, I'm gonna talk about myself. It's gonna be from my perspective. I've done this thing here with the word framed and the word framework because I think that the systems we operate within promise us much more than they can deliver on. I think this gap is actually very significant, and I also particularly like the word framework in its technological sense because it basically means that users can extend it and can build on it, but they cannot change the source code. So this is what we basically as artists can do. And I'm going to start with the great expectations that are set ultimately by the internet. Because, internet promises everything, and we've talked about it a lot, how it grants access to everything, how it's all about the indefinite sharing, how it can solve the refugee crisis, how it can basically be a recipe for all good in the world. We already know that's not true, but that was the promise behind it, or this is how we talked about it in the beginning. And when you're an artist, you cannot not think about the internet, primarily because if you're making music, it's going to be listened to online, and not only it's going to be listened to online, it's just your primary revenue stream, and it's been like this since a year. Another thing that the internet promises, apart from everything, which is a lot, is the do-it-yourself thing. With all the tools on your disposal, you can be your own producer, you can be your own manager, you can promote your art. It's very encouraging. Also, many famous people have done it, and they are the examples. Those people include, for example, Amanda Palmer. She's an American songwriter who, in 2012, she crowdfunded a record sum at this moment for her album. It was $1.2 million. She also gave a TED talk about it. It was called The Art of Asking, and she said there that you don't have to make people pay for your music, you can let them pay for your music. It's a very beautiful quote. Radiohead, another very famous band, let people pay for their music. There is a band, 9 Inch Nails. It's actually a rock band, and it goes far back. I think they started in '87, and they've published their stuff on Creative Commons, and they got a boost out of it, a PR boost. So, do it yourself. Then you cannot ignore the internet, not just because this is how people will get to know about you and listen to your music, most likely. You cannot ignore it because the internet changes everything in a way, and the online affects offline a lot. And apparently when it comes to music, one of those things, one of the effects is that people who spend so much time in front of their screens, they crave for the real experience even more. So tickets for concerts are supposed to sell better. And also people basically expect more from you. It's not just about your music, it's about your personality, about the relationship you can create with your fans, about the merchandise probably. Of course you can make a lot of money on merchandise. I think the most popular example is the example of George Lucas, who you probably know he got very little money for the first part of Star Wars, but he signed this contract that said that he can reserve all the rights to the sequels and to the merchandise, and he became a very rich man. So there are all these things. This is a context. There are 2 books. There is Great Expectation, and there is also A Little Life. Very good book, actually, I think. So there is a lot of promises, and there is a lot of expectations. And then for people who are not famous and artists who are just starting, it's a little bit more difficult. Here is this famous conversation between Taylor Swift and Vice President of Apple about there was this 3 months trial for using iTunes, and Taylor Swift was concerned that artists will not be paid for this trial, since iTunes wouldn't be paid. And she raised some questions about how musicians are compensated, especially indie musicians. The last tweet says, "We hear you, Taylor Swift, and indie artists love Apple." It's a very internet talk, but it doesn't change much really when it comes to compensation. Then you can monetize. You can become a viral video, but this works for some people, and it worked for Psy, the guy from South Korea who's Gangnam Style that you probably know. He hit at some point 1 billion views on YouTube, and it was a record. Maybe it's still a record, I'm not sure. You can also, about the more part, you can star in adverts or use your fame for something else, or you can basically capitalize on the fact that you're making music. When I was making this presentation, Bob Dylan still did not receive the Nobel Prize. We know that the fact that he starred in a Victoria's Secret commerce did not ruin his career, but it was a little bit weird. And the last thing that's very difficult to overcome when you want to publish on the internet is the filter bubble. And we know it doesn't only apply to music, it also applies to simply to information. People want to hear what they already know or what they heard about. They don't really search for the broadening horizon thing. And now I'm going to talk about how in the context of all that me and my friends, how we started a band called Niskie Ciśnienie. It translates into low pressure. It's a horrible name for marketing. It gives you back all the pieces of advice for your health issues when you type it in Google. But we called it this way also because, especially at the beginning, we had very low expectations and no expectations, low pressure, no pressure on a commercial success. We just did it as a side project. And it actually started when my friend, Alexandra Janus, who is the author of the lyrics, she wrote me an email, and I really liked this email. And I thought, wow, this could be a nice song. And then I thought, I can make this a song. And so this is how it started. And Alexandra and I, we've been in the world of technology for culture and for social change for years now. And we're also both educators. And when we worked, we kept telling people how it totally makes sense for them to use technologies, to not be scared of them, and we were talking about all of the things that it promises. And so we wanted to use it in our work, and the logo is, for example, a public domain picture that was remixed. We crowdfunded for our debut album. We played with communications in the process. We had a communication strategy for this. Of course, we used social media. We used Facebook primarily, unfortunately. We had to pay for advertising there too. We did little crazy things like analog data visualizations for the crowdfunding option. We organized very little concerts for people, private concerts, and those were the perks in the crowdfunding process. So we played with a lot of things that we thought that new technologies enable and inspire. And, we crowdfunded, we produced an album, we publish everything we do on Creative Commons, both the lyrics and the music. So one can say that it was a success, but then like the reality hit us, and it's very difficult. There was this presentation before me, the first one in this stream, about how difficult it is to actually make money, and maybe if not even make money, then to be compensated in any way for the things you do. This is a part of a letter Creative Commons wrote to Facebook at some point about the content that we publish there, the situation that you cannot really license it on Creative Commons. There is no way. On YouTube you can actually do this, for example. And so what I want to say with this quote is that Facebook for some people is the internet, and what internet promised is in a big part what Creative Commons was promising, or like the foundations of it. And of course every vision should be ambitious, but this is a very ambitious vision. and you cannot really expect all this to happen, then what strikes you is, I don't know if I should call it the real world, but basically there is no additional perks for people who make music and publish on Creative Commons. Like, I know what everyone says, that you can more easily promote your work and other people can use it, but if you're not famous and if you're not well known, you're not going to be heard. And I'm not saying that this is a fault of Creative Commons, this is just one of the conditions, but if we want to keep and preserve the internet as an idea that it once was, we should probably think a little more about how to encourage people to actually use Creative Commons, because they really don't have to if they're online. So in a way we are framed between the expectations and the reality. And like in the entire process, when I was thinking about it, of course we've just made a decision about, for example, publishing on Creative Commons. In the beginning it was an ideological decision, and then all of these things happened, and I still stand by it. Like, this is an ideological decision. It just should be done this way. It's like in politics or basically in life. It doesn't have to pay back. It's a symbol, something we stand for. So this is this modest contribution we can make by being modest amateur artists. We don't only have to declare that we believe in Creative Commons, we can actually add a piece to the puzzle. And that's it. I also encourage you to listen to the band, of course.